My name is Claire Bennett. I am 32 years old, and last Christmas Eve, my brother-in-law cornered me in my parents' kitchen, looked me dead in the eye, and said something that made my blood run cold. If Olivia ever tries to leave me, I'll make sure she walks out with nothing. For 7 years, my family treated Dr. Nathan Hayes like royalty, the successful cardiac surgeon, the perfect husband, the man who gave my sister the dream life we were all supposed to envy. And for 7 years, they reminded me that I'd settled by marrying just a chef, a man who smells like garlic and rosemary instead of cologne and sterile hospital soap. What Nathan confessed to me that night exposed a truth so dark. It burned our perfect family portrait to ashes. My mother still can't talk about that Christmas without tears. My father hasn't touched alcohol since that night. And my sister, she finally sleeps without her phone hidden in the trunk of her car, terrified he'll check her messages. Before I tell you exactly what he said and how one holiday dinner destroyed everything we thought we knew about success, love, and what makes a good husband, I need you to do one thing. Listen all the way to the end. Because if you hear your own life echoing in this story, it might be the wake-up call you've been pretending you don't need. If you're feeling that familiar knot forming in your chest right now, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I like knowing whose midnight thoughts I'm sharing. Only hit like or subscribe if this story actually resonates with you. No pressure. We get enough guilt trips from our families already. All right. Let me take you back to where this really started. Not last Christmas. 5 years earlier. The first night I brought my husband, Ethan, home to meet my family. The November wind cut through our coats as Ethan and I walked up the pathway to my parents' pristine 2-story brick house. His fingers were laced through mine, and in his other hand, he balanced a heavy wooden box against his hip. Remind me again why anyone needs 3 different types of stuffing, he asked, trying to lighten his nerves with humor. Because my mother believes emotional problems can be solved with carbs, I replied. Inside that box were 2 loaves of his handmade sourdough bread, a jar of house-made cranberry chutney, a maple pecan tart that had taken him hours to perfect, and a bottle of wine with a handwritten tag. From Ember Street Kitchen. Thank you for having me. He'd stayed at the restaurant until 2 a.m. finishing prep, then spent the morning baking that bread himself. My mother opened the door before we could knock, her smile bright and wide-directed entirely at me, Claire. Honey. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like roasted turkey and expensive perfume. Then she saw Ethan. The box. The flour is still dusting his sleeves. You must be Ethan, she said, her tone dropping half a note. Her eyes flicked to the wooden box. Oh, that's cute. Very homemade. It's a little sampler from the restaurant, Ethan explained, his smile easy but his shoulders tense. I thought you might like to. Speaking of gifts, my mother interrupted, excitement lighting up her face. Guess what Nathan sent us? A whole case of reserve Cabernet from Napa. You can't even buy it in stores. They only ship it to their top donors. She stepped back to let us enter, already calling over her shoulder. Dennis. They're here. My father appeared in the hallway, loosening his collar like he'd just walked out of a board meeting instead of the living room. He shook Ethan's hand with the grip of someone testing whether a chair leg would wobble. So you're the chef, he said. Yeah, I run busy industry, Dad interrupted. Long hours. Is it stable? Do you have benefits? A retirement plan? I felt Ethan's grip tighten around my hand. We're getting there, he said. I opened my own place last year, and car doors slammed in the driveway. My mother's entire demeanor transformed. They're here, she practically sang, rushing to the door. The black Audi gleamed under the gray November sky. My sister Olivia stepped out first, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her coat draped over her shoulders like she'd walked out of a catalog shoot. Then Nathan rounded the hood, tall, impeccably dressed, radiating the kind of easy confidence people often mistake for genuine kindness. "Mom?" Olivia laughed as our mother enveloped her in a hug. "Nathan, you look exhausted," Mom said, though her tone was filled with pride. "Saving too many lives again comes with the territory," he replied smoothly, handing my father a sleek bottle. "Bourbon from a grateful patient's family. Thought you might enjoy it, sir." Dad's entire face softened. "Now that's a man who understands me." He grinned. Behind them, Ethan quietly slid his wooden box onto the hall table. No one mentioned it for the rest of the night. Later, after dessert, I found my mother in the kitchen cutting herself another slice of Ethan's maple pecan tart. Her fork hovered guiltily in midair when she saw me. "This is actually really good," she admitted, sounding almost surprised. "You can tell him that, I said. She shrugged, looking away. "He seems nice. I just wish you'd thought more about your future, about security." That was the first time I realized my mother could enjoy Ethan's work and still look down on his life. It was also the first time I saw the pattern, the one I would spend the next 5 years pretending didn't exist. I was standing at our kitchen counter in our small apartment, chopping carrots for soup after a long day working as a high school guidance counselor. Ethan was at the stove, searing chicken in a cast iron skillet, humming off-key to some indie band only he listens to. My phone buzzed. "Mom?" I put it on speaker and kept chopping. "Did you hear?" she asked, her voice crackling with excitement. "Olivia and Nathan just bought a house in Lake Forest. 4 bedrooms. Home theater. Heated driveway. It's absolutely stunning." "That's great, Mom," I said. "It's more than great. It's what success looks like." Her familiar pause followed. "I just wish you had aimed a little higher, honey." There it was. "Ethan is doing really well," I said, keeping my voice even. "The restaurant is Ethan is sweet," she cut in quickly, in that tone people use right before they say but you settled, Claire. You know you did. A chef. My younger daughter married a chef." Behind me, the sizzle in the pan went quiet. Ethan had turned off the burner. I stared at the cutting board, at the bright orange carrot rounds against the scarred wood. "Mom, I don't want to have this conversation right now," I said. "I'm just worried about you." She insisted. "Olivia doesn't have to think about money. She has stability, security, a man with a real career. I wanted that for you too." When I hung up, the kitchen felt too quiet. Ethan rinsed his hands under the tap, the water running longer than necessary, his shoulders tense. "You don't have to defend me," he said finally. "But it would be nice if you did." My throat burned. What she said wasn't fair. I managed. He looked at me for a long second, then nodded. "Okay," he said. That single word sat between us all night, heavier than the cast iron pan cooling on the stove. What my parents didn't know, what no one knew, was that Ethan had just signed a major contract to cater 3 corporate retreats for a tech company downtown. For us, it was huge. It meant stability, expansion, breathing room. But that wasn't what hurt. What hurt was realizing that my silence at every family dinner was starting to look a lot like agreement. We were standing side by side, folding towels and mismatched socks. The fluorescent light buzzed. The dryer hummed. Everything felt ordinary, boring, safe. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said, rolling a pair of socks together. "Sure. Do you ever stick up for us when it's just you and them?" The towel in my hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. I mean, he chose his words carefully, like they were hot coals. I hear the jokes, the comments, real doctor versus the guy who plays with food. And I never hear you push back. You just kind of laugh along. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I don't want to make things worse, I said. You know how they get. If I push back, it turns into a whole scene. He nodded slowly, looking down at the laundry basket. Okay, he said again, not angry, not yelling, just accepting it in a way that somehow felt worse than any argument. Later that week, I found an envelope tucked behind some old cookbooks on our shelf. Inside were 3 pages covered in Ethan's messy handwriting. A letter to my parents. He'd written about the restaurant, about how he'd grown up watching his grandmother cook, about how he loved building something from scratch, about how deeply he loved me, about how seriously he took the responsibility of taking care of us, of building a life together. He'd never mailed it. Why not? I asked, holding the pages up when he came home. He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. They've already decided who I am, he said quietly. Nothing I write is going to change that. That night, as he slept beside me and streetlight painted shadows across our ceiling, one thought kept circling in my mind. At school, I was the counselor telling teenagers, if somebody talks down to you every single day, that matters. You have a right to be treated with respect. In my parents' house, I was the daughter who smiled while her husband became the punchline. I sat across from a student named Megan in my cramped office. She was 17, smart, always turning in assignments early. Today, her eyes were red-rimmed, and her hoodie sleeves were pulled down over her hands despite the stuffy heat. He says I'm too sensitive, she murmured, twisting the edge of her sleeve. That I can't take a joke. Every time I get upset, he says, relax, Meg. You're crazy. Maybe I am. I leaned forward, that familiar protective anger simmering in my chest. If someone kept slamming your locker every day and said, relax, it's just a joke, would that make it hurt less? I asked gently. She shook her head. When you stay quiet about the ways someone hurts you, I continued, you're teaching yourself that you're not worth protecting. Her eyes filled with tears. You sound really sure about that, she whispered. I am, I said firmly. You deserve better than someone who makes you feel small. After she left, I closed my office door and leaned against it. The sentence I'd just given Megan echoed in my head like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Because the truth was, I wasn't living by my own advice. I was letting my parents treat Ethan like a hobby, like a phase I'd eventually grow out of. I was letting them treat me like I'd fumbled my one chance at a real life. That afternoon, my department chair, Dr. Patel, stopped by my office. You have a moment? She asked. She handed me a printed email. Your workshop proposal, recognizing hidden emotional abuse in teen relationships, got accepted. You're presenting at the statewide counselors conference in March. I blinked, stunned. I am. You are. She smiled. You see patterns other people miss, Claire. It's one of your greatest strengths. The irony hit me like a truck. I could see patterns in everyone's life but my own. That night, sitting at our kitchen table surrounded by half-wrapped Christmas gifts and unpaid bills, I made myself a quiet promise. This Christmas, I'm not going to stay quiet. I didn't know what that would look like. I just knew I was done. Watching Ethan shrink a little smaller every time we left my parents' house, I didn't realize my small decision was about to collide head-on with a secret that had been rotting in my sister's life for years. Christmas Eve arrived with that sharp Midwestern cold that finds its way into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. Ethan drove while I watched the houses get progressively larger the closer we got to my parents' neighborhood. He parked in front of their manicured lawn, The house was outlined in white lights, like something from a Hallmark movie. You ready? He asked, fingers still on the keys. No, I said honestly. But I'm not going to leave you alone there this time. He let out a breath he'd been holding. Whatever happens, we can always leave, he said. No explanations. No guilt. Deal. He grabbed the dessert he'd spent 2 nights perfecting, a chocolate hazelnut torte that looked like it belonged in a magazine, while I carried the gift bags. Inside, the house smelled like pine, rosemary, and money. My father sat in his leather chair, scrolling stock tickers on his tablet. My mother fluttered around the dining table, adjusting silverware that was already perfectly straight. On the sofa, Olivia and Nathan sat side by side, framed by the glow of the Christmas tree. Olivia looked as immaculate as always, cream sweater, fitted jeans, delicate gold necklace, but up close, something was off. Her cheekbones looked sharper. The circles under her eyes were darker, more pronounced. Claire, she said, standing to hug me. Up close. Her expensive perfume couldn't quite hide the faint smell of hospital antiseptic, clinging to her clothes, her arms wrapped around me. But there was tension in her shoulders, like she was bracing herself for impact. Ethan stepped forward, offering his hand to Nathan. Nathan, he said. Ethan, Nathan replied, giving his hand one quick, limp shake before turning back toward my father. Dennis. Wait until you hear about the case I had last week, he began, sliding effortlessly into storytelling mode. As Olivia pulled away from our hug, her sleeve rode up slightly. A bruise ringed her wrist, yellow at the edges, purple-black in the center. My stomach dropped. What happened? I asked quietly, keeping my voice low. She yanked the sleeve down like it had burned her. Bumped into a cart at work, she said too quickly, avoiding my eyes. It's nothing. My brain, trained after years of spotting what teenagers try to hide, filed it away immediately. The way she avoided eye contact, the way Nathan's fingers dug into the back of the couch whenever she spoke, the way her hand trembled slightly as she smoothed her hair. We moved to the dining room. Ethan's torte ended up on the sideboard, half hidden behind my mother's collection of crystal angels. We held hands around the table while my father said grace, thanking God for health, provision, and successful children who married providers. I squeezed Ethan's fingers under the table. Dinner started civilly enough. How's school, Claire? My mother asked, ladling mashed potatoes onto plates. Busy, I said. We're seeing a lot more anxiety this year. A lot of kids are stuck in unhealthy relationships. Well, that's why we tell girls to choose carefully, she said, glancing at Olivia and Nathan with an approving smile. You want a man who can take care of you. There it was. Olivia's fork scraped loudly against her plate. Nathan's been working insane hours, my father said proudly. They just put his picture up on the hospital donor wall. Did you see it? I did, my mother gushed. Our very own Dr. Hayes. Practically a celebrity. Nathan pretended to be modest, though his chest puffed slightly. It's nothing special, he said. We had a successful bypass this week. That's all. And how's the bistro? Dad asked, finally turning toward Ethan as he scooped stuffing onto his plate. It's going really well, Ethan said. We're actually booked solid through February, and we just got hired to handle all the catering for. That's cute, Mom interrupted, her smile tight. You always were creative. Nathan smirked into his wine glass. Must be nice, he said casually. No malpractice insurance to worry about. No life or death decisions. Just playing around with the presentation. There's pressure of a different kind, Ethan replied calmly. Payroll, rent, online reviews. But I love what I do. Sure, Nathan said, swirling his wine. Somebody has to feed people like me after we've been in the OR for 16 hours straight. Dad chuckled across the table. Olivia pushed peas around her plate without eating a single bite. Liv, you've lost weight, Mom said suddenly, her brow furrowing. Nathan, you're working her too hard. Look at her. She's being dramatic, Nathan said lightly, not even glancing at Olivia. We're just watching her macros more carefully. Gala season can be brutal if you're not careful. Olivia's fork clattered against the china. For a split second, I saw it clearly. Fear. Like lightning that reveals the whole landscape in one flash, right? She murmured. The macros. My counselor's brain snapped fully awake. The bruise. Weight loss. The constant praise for him. The subtle jabs at her. The way my parents ate it all up like free champagne at a wedding. After dinner, we migrated to the living room. The tree glowed softly. The fire crackled. The expensive bourbon came out. My mother decided it was gift opening time. She opened Ethan's present first, a custom cutting board made from walnut and cherry wood. Smooth as glass, with her initials carved elegantly in the corner. Oh, she said, turning it over once. It's homemade. Very rustic. You've always been crafty. It's custom, I said before I could stop myself. That's about $300 worth of work if he charged you full price. The room went silent. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Claire, there's no need to talk about money at Christmas, he said, half warning in his tone. Nathan chuckled. Hey, if the restaurant thing doesn't work out, maybe you could sell these on Etsy, he said to Ethan. You know, in between DoorDash orders. My mother laughed quick and guilty. Like a reflex, something inside me snapped cleanly in half. Old Claire would have smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. This time, I didn't. The doorbell rang, slicing through the tension like a knife. I invited Megan, Olivia said, standing too quickly. My friend from residency. I hope that's okay. My mother looked mildly annoyed, but pasted on her perfect hostess smile. A minute later, Megan walked in, early 30s, dark hair pulled into a messy bun, winter scarf still wrapped around her neck. She hugged Olivia like someone hugging a person who'd just barely made it out of a burning building. When they pulled apart, Megan's eyes flicked immediately to Nathan, then to the bruise just barely visible under Olivia's sleeve. Her jaw clenched. We made small talk for a while. Nathan monopolized my father's attention, talking about stocks and hospital board politics from the armchair. Ethan watched quietly, his eyes tired but alert. At one point, Megan caught my eye and tilted her head toward the hallway. Bathroom, she mouthed. I followed her out of the room. As soon as we were out of earshot, she grabbed my arm and whispered urgently, "How is she?" Really? I don't know, I admitted. She keeps saying she's fine, but she looks not fine. Megan finished grimly. She called me at 2 a.m. about 5 months ago. Said she couldn't breathe. Said every time she picked up her phone. Nathan wanted to know exactly who it was and what they'd said. My stomach clenched painfully. What happened? I asked. The next day she texted me and said she'd overreacted, Megan said, her voice tight with frustration. That Nathan was just very protective. Those exact words. I swallowed hard. Megan, does he? Has he ever actually? I work in risk management at the hospital now, she interrupted, her voice dropping even lower. There was an internal report filed about 6 months ago. Suspicious bruising. Controlling spouse. Your sister's name was on it. The cold flooded my veins. She withdrew it. Megan added quickly, her eyes shining. The very next day, said she didn't want to ruin his career. My hand went to my mouth. Why didn't you? I'm not supposed to see those files, she said, cutting me off. I could lose my job just for knowing about it. But when I saw her name, Claire, listen to me. I read your workshop summary in the staff email blast. If anyone in this family is going to believe her, it's you. Voices rose faintly from the living room. Please, Megan said, gripping my wrist. If you see anything tonight, anything at all, don't look away. She won't leave on her own. He's convinced her she can't survive without him. Megan went back ahead of me, her expression carefully neutral. I stood alone in the hallway for a moment, heart pounding, the puzzle pieces locking together into a horrifying picture I couldn't unsee. By 10 o'clock, the wine and bourbon had loosened everyone's tongues, everyone except Ethan's. Nathan lounged on the sofa, one arm stretched along the back, wine glass dangling from his fingers like a prop. My father sat in his usual chair, face slightly flushed. Olivia perched on the edge of the love seat like a bird ready to take flight at the slightest sound. So, Dad said, swirling his drink. Any big plans for the new year, Nathan? Possible promotion, Nathan said casually, like it was no big deal. They've been hinting at department heads within a few years. Comes with a pretty sizable raise. Mom actually clasped her hands together. My son-in-law, she said, beaming. Can you believe it, Claire? I felt Ethan's eyes on me from across the room. What about you, Ethan? Dad asked, half smiling. Any plans for the restaurant? More pop-up tasting menus? What do you call them, Carol? Supper clubs? Ethan took a slow breath. We're actually thinking about opening a second location on the north side, he said. The catering contract we landed gave us enough capital to. Nathan cut in with a sharp laugh. Second location? In this economy? He said, shaking his head. That's a bold move. Might want to wait until you've got a few more years of experience under your belt. Wouldn't want to end up back working as a line cook somewhere when it fails. Dad chuckled. Mom smiled tightly at me, her expression saying, don't make a scene out of this. I set my wine glass down carefully on the coffee table. Nathan, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and even. Please stop talking down to my husband. Oh, come on, he said, waving his hand dismissively. We're just messing around, right, Ethan? Ethan's jaw flexed. I don't find it funny, he said quietly. My father shifted uncomfortably. All right. Let's not turn this into a fight, he said quickly. We're all just having fun here. Nathan leaned forward, his eyes glittering with something sharp and mean. Let's be completely honest, he said. Claire could have married any number of doctors, lawyers, whatever. She chose a guy who cooks for a living. That's unexpected. We all think so. Time seemed to slow down. I looked at my parents. They didn't argue. They didn't correct him. They just sat there in uncomfortable silence. That silence was my answer. Ethan stood up abruptly. I need some air, he said, his voice steady in a way that actually scared me more than if he'd yelled. He walked toward the back door, shoulders rigid, every muscle tense. At the threshold. He paused just long enough for me to see it clearly on his face. Defeat. Like someone had let all the air out of him. I'd never seen him look like that before. Something inside me broke. I'm done, I said softly. What? My mother asked. I'm done pretending this is okay. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Once, twice. I ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again insistently. I pulled it out, grateful for any distraction from the tension suffocating the room. Unknown number. I can't keep doing this. I need to tell someone the truth. Can we talk? Naomi's eyes flicked up involuntarily. Nathan was watching me, his face suddenly pale, his grip on his wine glass so tight his knuckles had gone white. A fourth text came through immediately. Wrong number. Ignore that. But it was too late. I wasn't the person he'd meant to message. He'd reached for someone else, some other confident hand accidentally revealed himself. I slid my phone back into my pocket, my heart hammering. I'm going to check on Ethan, I said. Standing, Claire, my mother started. If you want me to stay here, I interrupted calmly. You're going to stop letting him talk about my husband like that. She closed her mouth. I walked toward the back door. The December air hit my face like a slap. Sharp and brutal. Ethan stood at the edge of the yard, hands gripping the railing, his breath clouding in front of him. I'm sorry, I said, joining him. I should have shut that down so much sooner. He shook his head. You don't need to apologize for them, he said. I don't know how many more of these I have left in me, Claire. My chest squeezed painfully. We don't keep doing this, I said firmly. Not like this. I promise. Footsteps crunched on the frost-covered grass behind us. Claire, Nathan called out. Can we talk? Alone? Ethan went very still. It's fine, I said quietly to him. I'll meet you in the car in 10 minutes. He hesitated, searching my face. 10 minutes. He repeated, not 11. He brushed past Nathan without a word, shoulders squared. Nathan watched him go, then turned to me. His breath reeked of whiskey. You think you've got me all figured out, don't you? He said, words only slightly slurred. I don't think about you that much, Nathan, I replied evenly. Honestly, I try not to. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You should, he said, voice rising slightly. Because your sister is destroying my life. Funny, I said. That's not how it looks from where I'm standing. You don't know what it's like living with her. He continued, his voice pitching higher. She goes through my phone. Check my emails. Times how long I'm at the hospital. I can't breathe. I'm the one who needs help here, not her. It was eerie. Hearing the same script I'd heard from controlling partners in countless high school relationships. Now coming from a 38-year-old cardiac surgeon. You're a counselor, he said, stepping closer. You know that sometimes the person crying is actually the problem, right? I kept my voice carefully neutral, the way I do in my office when I want someone to keep talking and revealing themselves. That must be really difficult for you, I said. Who handles the finances in your house? He blinked, thrown off. What? You said she controls everything, I clarified. So whose name is actually on the bank accounts? Credit cards? The house deed? He scoffed. I manage the finances, he said defensively. She's terrible with numbers. That's not control, that's being responsible. Does she have a credit card with only her name on it? I asked quietly. One she can use without asking you first? He hesitated. We're a team, he said finally. Big purchases are decisions we make together. Who decided she would leave her architecture firm? I asked. You? Or did she realize it wasn't worth fighting you every time she stayed late at work? His jaw clenched hard. She was stressed. He snapped. I told her she didn't have to work if she didn't want to. Any other woman would be grateful for that. What about the hospital report? I said, the words tasting like metal on my tongue. The one she filed, and then withdrew the next day. For a moment, something genuinely ugly flickered across his face. She's unstable, he said finally, his voice cold. She bruises herself, throws herself into things when she's upset. It's self-harm. I'm the one who has to clean up her messes. But you all want to paint me as the monster. I'd heard it all before. Different names, different details. Same playbook. You know what's funny? I said quietly. You're not even original. His eyes narrowed dangerously. You can tell whatever sob story you want. I continued. But you and I both know that text wasn't meant for me. He stiffened like I'd struck him. You really want to go down this road? He said, his voice dropping to something menacing. Because if Olivia ever tries to walk out, I will make absolutely sure she walks out with nothing. I will bury her in debt and lawyers. I will drag her name through every professional circle she cares about. You think you can protect her from that? Something inside me went cold and completely still. Try it, I said. The back door opened. Olivia stood in the doorway, the porch light creating a halo round her blonde hair. Her face was ghostly white. I heard every word, she said, her voice shaking. Nathan turned so fast he nearly slipped on the frost. Liv, you're upset, he said, his tone shifting instantly, smooth as silk. You're not hearing this correctly. Don't, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Don't you dare explain it to me. My mother appeared behind her, dish towel still clutched in her hand. Eyes wide with confusion and growing horror. My father loomed over her shoulder. What on earth is going on out here? Mom asked. Olivia stepped fully onto the porch, and with deliberate, careful movements, she pulled up her sleeve. The bruise on her wrist glared under the yellow porch light, clear, undeniable. There were more on her forearm, fainter, older. A timeline of violence mapped across her skin. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Nathan, Dad said, his voice dangerously low. She does that to herself, Nathan said immediately, desperately. She gets worked up and throws herself into walls when she's having an episode. You know how emotional she can be. Megan's voice cut through the cold air like a knife. I work in risk management at the hospital, she said from the doorway, arms crossed. That's not what the photographs in the file looked like. Nathan spun on her. You had absolutely no right, neither did you. She shot back, her voice steady and fierce. You told her if she pressed charges, you'd ruin her reputation. Those were her exact words. Continue 624 am not mine. Olivia's shoulders started shaking. He tracks everything, she whispered, the words tumbling out like water from a broken dam. What I spend, who I text, where I go. He has an app on my phone that shows him my exact location at all times. If I don't respond to his messages fast enough, he calls and calls until I pick up. My father swayed slightly, his face gray. Is this true? He asked Nathan, his voice barely controlled. She's exaggerating, Nathan said, his composure cracking at the edges. She has anxiety. I was trying to help her feel safe. That's what a good husband does. He reached for Olivia's arm. She flinched back so violently she hit the doorframe, a small cry escaping her lips. Don't touch me, she said, her voice breaking. The air went razor sharp and deadly quiet. Megan stepped closer to Olivia, placing one hand very gently on her back. I believe you, Megan said clearly. My mother started to cry, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. I'm so sorry, she choked out. I didn't see it. I should have seen it. I should have protected you. Nathan's carefully constructed mask shattered completely. You're all insane, he snapped, his voice rising to a shout. Do you have any idea what I've done for this family? The connections I've made, the referrals, the money I've brought in. You think you'll keep any of that if you turn on me? You think any of that matters? My father said quietly, stepping fully between Nathan and the rest of us. If you've been hurting my daughter. He squared his shoulders. Get out of my house. Nathan's mouth dropped open in shock. Dennis, you don't, I said. Dad repeated, his voice like steel. Get out of my house. Right now. Before I call the police and tell them to reopen that hospital report myself. For a second, I genuinely thought Nathan might try to physically fight him. Instead, he let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Fine, he said. But this isn't over. Olivia can't survive without me. None of you can. He grabbed his coat from the hook by the door, slammed through the front entrance, and stomped down the driveway to his Audi. The echo of the car door slamming rolled through the house like distant thunder. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Olivia's knees buckled. We half carried her to the sofa in the living room. She curled into herself, clutching a throw pillow so tightly her knuckles turned bone white. Megan sat on one side, rubbing slow, soothing circles on her back. I sat on the other side, holding her trembling hand. Mom hovered nearby, tears streaming down her face. Dad stood by the window, staring out into the darkness like he expected Nathan to reappear at any moment. I tried to leave, Olivia whispered eventually, staring at nothing, twice. Mom made a broken sound. You never told us, she said, her voice raw. The first time was when he smashed my phone. Olivia said, her voice flat and emotionless, because I didn't answer a text within 3 minutes. He said he just lost his temper. He cried afterward. Apologized. I forgave him. She swallowed hard. The second time was when I filed that hospital report. She continued. He told me if I ruined his career, he would systematically ruin my entire life. Take the house, clean out all the accounts, tell everyone I was crazy and violent. He said no one would ever believe me because you all adored him so much. She looked at my parents, her eyes hollow and haunted. He wasn't wrong, she said quietly. Dad flinched like she'd physically struck him. I am so sorry, he said, his voice hoarse and broken. I chose being impressed over being your protector. That will never happen again. I swear to you. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his eyes moving carefully between all of us. I motioned him over. Liv, he said gently, crouching down to her eye level. We have a spare room in our apartment. It's tiny, the bed squeaks, but the lock works. And Nathan has never been there. You can stay as long as you need to. She stared at him, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. For years, you've been the punchline at every single family dinner, she whispered. Why are you being kind to me? Because how they've treated me, he said, glancing briefly at my parents. Says more about them than it does about me. And because you're Claire's sister. That's more than enough reason. More tears spilled down her face. I don't remember the last time I didn't feel scared, she admitted. You're scared right now, I said, squeezing her hand. But for the first time, you're scared and you're not alone. We left my parents' house just after midnight. Mom stood on the porch, arms wrapped tightly around herself against the cold. Please text me when you get home safely, she said. I don't care what time it is. I nodded. Driving back to our apartment, Olivia stared out the window like she was seeing the world for the very first time. In our small living room, she looked around at the mismatched furniture Ethan had built by hand. The slightly crooked Christmas tree, the string lights we never quite managed to hang straight. It's cozy, she said softly. That's code for really small, Ethan joked gently. She shook her head, a tiny smile appearing. It's code for safe, she said. That night, she slept in our spare room with the door cracked open, her phone charging on the nightstand instead of hidden in a laundry basket under towels. I lay awake, in our bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the apartment, knowing with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The week between Christmas and New Year's blurred into a chaotic mix of paperwork, phone calls, and long, difficult conversations over endless cups of coffee. Olivia found a therapist who specialized in domestic violence through the hotline. We sat together in the kitchen while she made that first terrifying call, my hand resting on her knee for support. Ethan quietly washing dishes in the background like a steady metronome of normalcy. Megan connected her with a lawyer who specialized specifically in coercive control cases, a relatively new legal concept that was finally starting to gain traction. The lawyer listened without judgment, asked intelligent questions, and most importantly, never once said, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" In January, Olivia moved into a small one-bedroom apartment across town. The building wasn't fancy. The walls were thin enough to hear neighbors' conversations. The oven door squeaked every time it opened. But the lease was in her name and her name only. Nathan sent flowers, long, rambling emails, apology voicemails dialed up to 11 with dramatic emotion. "I was just stressed from work. I'll get professional help, I promise. You're overreacting to everything. I can't live without you." He also sent threats peppered in between the apologies. "I'll fight you in court with everything I have. You'll never be able to prove any of this. You're going to regret leaving me." Olivia kept everything: screenshots, voice recordings, written notes with dates and times. "So, did the lawyer? My parents came over for dinner 2 weeks after New Year's. For the first time in my entire adult life, my mother texted beforehand to ask, 'What can we bring?' instead of just telling me what she decided was appropriate. They walked into our small apartment carrying a simple salad and a cheap bottle of red wine, no expensive showpieces, no passive-aggressive superiority. Ethan's cooking filled the apartment. Roasted chicken with herbs, lemon potatoes, green beans with toasted almonds. Simple, honest food that tasted like home. Mom looked around the apartment like she was truly seeing it for the first time. "You made all this furniture yourself?" she asked, running her hand along the back of a chair Ethan had built. "Yeah," he said. "It's not perfect, but it's ours. It's beautiful," she said. And this time, I actually believed her. Halfway through dinner, Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. "I owe you both a real apology," he said, staring down at his plate. "Dad," I started. "No," he interrupted firmly. "You both need to hear this. You spent years listening to us compare you to Olivia and Nathan. We were completely wrong about what success actually looks like, about what real security means, about you." He looked directly at Ethan. "I read that article about your restaurant in the Tribune last week," he said. "The food critic said your cooking feels like being remembered by someone who really knows you. That's genuinely special, son." Ethan blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means a lot." Later, after my parents had gone home and we were loading the dishwasher together, I turned to Ethan. "How do you feel?" I asked. He paused, thinking carefully. "Like someone finally turned the volume down," he said. "Like I can actually breathe in that house now." March arrived cold and slushy. The kind of weather that makes you question why anyone lives in the Midwest. I stood behind a podium in a hotel conference room, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, palms sweaty, trying desperately not to imagine throwing up in front of 200 school counselors. On the screen behind me, my presentation title glowed: "Invisible Lines, Coercive Control in Perfect Relationships." Claire Bennett, M.Ed. "Abuse doesn't always look like bruises," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "Sometimes it looks like a perfectly curated Instagram feed. A big house in the right neighborhood, a luxury car in the driveway, a partner everyone else envies." I talked about subtle financial control masquerading as taking care of someone, about jealousy disguised as protection and devotion, about jokes that always punch down, that always diminish, about the way abusive people twist every story until the person they're hurting genuinely believes they're the problem. I gave examples from anonymized student cases, carefully protecting identities. I didn't mention my sister by name. I didn't need to. In the third row, I saw them. Ethan, Olivia, my parents, they'd all taken time off work to be there, to support me. When I finished, the applause washed over me, warm and loud and overwhelming. Afterward, in the hallway outside the conference room. My mother hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I am so incredibly proud of you," she whispered against my hair. "Not just for what you do at school every day, for what you did for your sister, for what you're teaching me about real love and real strength." Dad shook Ethan's hand, really shook it this time, gripping his shoulder warmly with his other hand. "That patio table you built for us last month," he said. "Think you could show me how to make something like that? I'd love to learn." Ethan's entire face lit up. "Yeah," he said, breaking into a genuine smile. "We can definitely do that." Watching them together, I realized something profound. I had spent years desperately waiting for my parents to see Ethan the way I saw him. But the real transformation happened when I finally decided I deserved a life where my husband wasn't treated like a punchline and my voice wasn't just background noise. Once I drew that line clearly in the sand, everything else started slowly rearranging itself, imperfectly, messily, but definitely. Today, I'm sitting in our living room, morning sunlight spilling through the window onto the wooden rocking chair in the corner. Ethan built that chair during the first year of our marriage. It took him weeks, working late into the night after restaurant shifts. We'd given it to my parents for their anniversary that year. Mom had called it country looking and tucked it away in a corner of their guest room where nobody would see it. Last month, a delivery truck pulled up to our building. 2 men carried that rocking chair up our stairs. A note taped carefully to the seat in my mother's precise handwriting. "This belongs with you. It always did." Ethan's at the restaurant right now, finishing prep for tonight's dinner service. Olivia just texted me a photo. Her sitting at a small drafting table by her apartment window, tracing architectural lines for a community center project she's consulting on part-time. She's not fixed. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy and complicated and full of setbacks. She still flinches at raised voices. She still double-checks locks more than most people. She still has nightmares sometimes. But she laughs now. Real, full-bellied laughs that make her wipe tears from her eyes. Nathan took a job at a smaller hospital in another state after his professional hearing. There's an official note in his employment file now. It's not as much justice as I'd like, but it's something. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, my brain tries to spin the old story again. That I disappointed my parents. That my life is somehow less than because it doesn't come with country club memberships and luxury cars. Then I look around our apartment, at the slightly scuffed hardwood floors we refinished ourselves, at the hand-built bookshelves crammed with cookbooks and young adult novels, at the rocking chair that finally came home, where it belonged. I think about how Ethan has never once made me feel small. Not when I failed my licensing exam the first time. Not when I accidentally ruined his favorite cast iron pan. Not when I finally admitted how long I'd stayed silent while my family diminished him. Security, I've learned, isn't about salary brackets or prestigious job titles or the right zip code. Real security is being with someone who makes you feel safe enough to be exactly who you are: messy, scared, hopeful, flawed, imperfect, and loves you more, not less. For all of it. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing that kind of love over their narrow definition of success, not even your parents, especially not the people who confuse control with care, or money with worth. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, first, thank you, truly. If this hit a little too close to home, the jokes that never actually feel like jokes. The partner everyone thinks is amazing, but who leaves you constantly walking on eggshells. The family that values appearances over your actual well-being. I want you to hear this clearly. You are not overreacting just because someone else is under-responding. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to say, Don't talk about my partner that way. You're allowed to leave the room. You're allowed to leave the relationship entirely. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with your family about how they treated you or your partner? Did they respect that boundary? Or did everything blow up first? Drop your story in the comments. Some stranger scrolling at 2 a.m., feeling alone and crazy, might read your words and realize they're not overreacting, they're finally seeing clearly. For the first time. And if this story sat uncomfortably in your chest, in that necessary way that makes real change possible, hit that like button so it has a better chance of finding the next person who desperately needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next one. If it helped you even a little, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. I'll see you in the next story.